early founder never intended to start a religious denomination. There has to be a reason for doing that. There may be very many reasons, but the man who started it was called George Jeffreys. But this man was born in South Wales in 1889. So when the census was done in March of 1901, he was just 12 years of age, living at home with his mother and two older brothers. And at 12 years of age, he'd just started work in the coal mines. So he's recorded there as being a miner and what was called a door boy. That's the lowliest part when you start in the colliery. But he was actually converted a few years later, in November of 1904, on a Thursday night, and then settling it on a Sunday, right at the beginning of the Welsh revival. He was one of a family of 12 children. But when you look at the family background, when I mentioned about working with his two brothers, they were there with him in the coal mine in 1901, but in 1903, the first of them died at the age of 31, and then his other brother died at the age of 24, again before the revival. And in fact, they came from a very poor and a very difficult background like that. So George Jeffreys was converted in my stake in November of 1904, at the beginning of the Welsh revival. Now, after the revival had subsided somewhat, some of the people who wanted things to go on, wanted prayer meetings rather than singing festivals and concerts, became known as the children of the revival. And George Jeffreys and his brother Stephen, an older brother, associated themselves with such groups as that. But after a little while, they began to be introduced to some of the emerging groups of Pentecostal people who were speaking in tongues and praying for the sick that they might be healed. At first, George was opposed to this, but later on, he associated himself with these people and eventually put himself forward as a candidate to be trained to be a missionary. And he went to a finishing school at Preston in 1912. But he was only there for a very short time, because his brother Stephen had been invited to take some meetings down in Swansea, and revival had broken out, and Stephen had run out of sermons, and he sent a telegram to George to ask him to come and help him. So George left the Bible school in January of 1913 and went to help his brother. And such a revival broke out that 148 people were converted, people were miraculously healed, and a number were baptized in the Spirit. In fact, one of the Christian magazines, The Life of Faith, that was the official magazine of the Keswick movement, took up the story and said, "Has revival broken out again in Wales?" And suddenly George Jeffreys, only about 24 years of age, suddenly found his name splashed on the prime Christian magazine. And then there were demands for his services all over the place, in part of eastern Wales, eastern central Wales, and then in London. And quite a lot of people wanted him to come and preach for them. Now, at this time, he was not officially a minister. He wasn't attached to any denomination, except that his association was with what was called the Pentecostal Missionary Union.